All right, today we're diving into a really important new safety mandate that's just come out for Leonardo A119 and AW119MKII helicopters. And believe it or not, it all comes down to one tiny single part that could potentially cause a complete engine failure right in the middle of a flight. So let's get right into it.
And that's really the big question here, isn't it? It seems almost unbelievable. You've got this incredibly powerful Pratt & Whitney engine, and deep inside of it, the health of one small pneumatic tube is pretty much the only thing standing between a perfectly normal flight and a critical in-air failure.
And let's be absolutely clear about what's at stake here. We are not talking about a minor glitch or some little warning light on the dash. The risk is a specific chain reaction that could lead to a total in-flight engine shutdown. So, understanding this whole directive isn't just about ticking a compliance box. It's about preventing an absolute catastrophe.
So, how exactly can one little line cause such a massive problem? Well, it all comes down to its connection to the engine's brain.
I want you to meet the Fuel Control Unit, or the FCU. The best way to think of it is as the engine's brain. It's constantly making these tiny, precise adjustments to the fuel flow to deliver exactly the power the pilot is asking for. Now, that little pneumatic line we're talking about, it's like a vital nerve, feeding the FCU the critical pressure data it needs to make the right decisions.
The whole path to failure starts with something really simple: chafing. The line just rubs and rubs against other parts inside the engine bay until eventually it ruptures. And as soon as that leak happens, the FCU is basically starved of correct information. It's getting bad data. And, like any computer, it's garbage in, garbage out. The end result, the engine can surge, it can lose power, or it could just shut down entirely.
Okay, so how was this really subtle but incredibly dangerous issue even discovered in the first place? Well, the story behind the directive is actually a perfect example of the aviation industry's proactive safety culture in action.
Yeah, the credit here goes directly to the people who know this engine better than anyone: Pratt & Whitney Canada. And this is the important part. This wasn't discovered after an accident. It was found through their own continuous monitoring and analysis, where they flagged this potential weakness in the pneumatic line.
And this slide right here reveals that official safety chain of command, so to speak. First, Pratt & Whitney issues what's called a service bulletin, which is basically a very strong recommendation. Then Leonardo, the helicopter manufacturer, takes that information and adopts it for their specific models. And then comes the final step. The safety authority, in this case EASA, issues an Airworthiness Directive, or AD. And that's what turns a recommendation into a legal requirement.
So let's take a closer look at the final mandate itself, EASA AD 2025-199. This is where all those recommendations become hard and fast rules.
The timeline here is pretty aggressive, which really tells you just how seriously EASA is taking this. The directive officially becomes effective on September 30th, 2025, and from that date, operators have a very clear, very strict window. You must perform these checks within the next 100 flight hours or within the next 12 months, whichever one of those milestones you hit first.
So who needs to pay attention? Well, this covers all A119 and AW119MKII helicopters that have the PT6B37A engine and some very specific fuel control units installed. The big takeaway for any operator watching this is simple. You have to go check your maintenance records against the serial numbers listed in that service bulletin to see if your aircraft is on the list.
Now, as you can imagine, a directive like this is never just a piece of paper. It creates this huge ripple effect that spreads across an entire operation, and it ends up impacting schedules, budgets, and the day-to-day work of a lot of different teams.
The initial inspection itself is actually pretty quick. It's estimated to take somewhere between 2 and 4 hours. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but as anyone in operations knows, any unscheduled downtime is a disruption. And of course, if a replacement part is needed, that time on the ground is going to get longer.
And here you can really see that ripple effect in action across the whole organization. For the engineers and maintenance planners, it's all about slotting these checks into the schedule and then doing the physical work. For the commercial teams, it's about managing lease compliance and making sure you have spare parts ready. And for management, well, they're overseeing the whole thing, making sure the fleet stays airworthy while trying to budget for all the costs involved.
Okay, so with all that context in mind, let's just boil this all down into a super clear, actionable checklist for any operator who's affected by this AD. The whole compliance process really breaks down into 4 key steps. Step 1, dig into your records and identify every single affected FCU in your fleet. 2, perform that initial visual check. 3,
Follow the detailed inspection procedure that's laid out in the service bulletin. And step 4, and this part is absolutely non-negotiable, if you find any damage, that line must be replaced before that helicopter's next flight, period.
This quote right here really gets to the heart of it all. The goal is twofold. First, upholding airworthiness. That's obvious. But it's also about preventing the massive operational disruptions that an in-flight incident would cause. It really is all about proactive safety.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This one single directive focused on one tiny little tube in one specific engine, it gives us a rare glimpse into the incredibly complex, collaborative, and constant effort that keeps aviation so safe. It's this amazing network of manufacturers, operators, and regulators, all working together to catch the smallest problems before they ever have a chance to become big ones.